My mother-in-law moved in temporarily 3 years ago and started making rules for my own house. Hi everyone, welcome back. Thanks for joining us today. We've got a brand new story to share with you. So let's begin. My name is Thomas. 3 years ago, my mother-in-law moved in with us temporarily after what she called a minor financial setback. What started as a few weeks of help turned into 3 years of her treating my house like her personal kingdom, while my wife stood by and watched. When I finally decided I'd had enough and put my foot down, my wife chose her mother's side over mine. That was the biggest mistake either of them ever made, and what I did next sent both of them packing faster than they could say family loyalty. When I first met my wife Jessica, I thought I'd won the lottery. She was intelligent, funny, and had this warmth that made everyone around her feel comfortable. We dated for 2 years before getting married, and during that time, I'd met her mother, Linda, several times. She seemed pleasant enough, maybe a little opinionated, but nothing that raised any red flags. Jessica always described her as strong-willed and independent, qualities I actually admired. Linda had been divorced for about 10 years when Jessica and I got married. She lived in her own apartment across town, worked as an office manager at a law firm, and seemed to have her life together. She was involved but not overbearing, attended our wedding, and gave us her blessing with what appeared to be genuine happiness. For the first 2 years of our marriage, everything was perfect. Jessica and I bought a house in a quiet neighborhood, both of us contributing to the down payment from our respective savings. I worked as a software engineer, Jessica was a nurse, and we were building a comfortable life together. Linda would visit occasionally, maybe once or twice a month for dinner or holidays, and our interactions were always pleasant. Then everything changed with a single phone call on a Tuesday evening in March. Jessica answered her phone while we were having dinner, and I watched her face grow concerned as she listened. When she hung up, she turned to me with worried eyes. That was my mom. She got laid off from her job last week and she's behind on rent. She might get evicted. I felt bad for Linda. Losing your job in your 50s isn't easy, and I knew she didn't have a lot of family support beyond Jessica. That's terrible, I said. Is there anything we can do to help? Jessica bit her lip, clearly uncomfortable with what she was about to ask. She was wondering if she could stay with us for a little while, just until she finds another job and gets back on her feet. Maybe a few weeks, a month at most. I didn't hesitate. Family helps family, and Linda was my family now too. Of course, I said. She can stay in the guest room as long as she needs. Jessica's relief was immediate and grateful. She hugged me tightly and told me how lucky she felt to have such an understanding husband. Looking back, I realized that moment was both the most generous and the most naive decision I'd ever made. Linda moved in the following weekend with what she claimed were just the essentials: 2 suitcases and a few boxes of personal items. She thanked me profusely for opening our home to her, promised it would be temporary, and assured me she'd start job hunting immediately. The first few weeks were actually pleasant. Linda helped with cooking and cleaning, shared stories about her work experiences, and seemed genuinely grateful for our hospitality. She'd spend her days online looking for job openings, and we'd discuss her prospects over dinner each evening. But somewhere around week 3, I started noticing subtle changes. Linda began rearranging things in our kitchen to be more efficient. She reorganized our living room furniture because the current layout didn't make sense. She started doing our laundry because we weren't separating colors properly. At first, I told myself she was just trying to be helpful. She was staying in our home for free, so maybe she felt obligated to contribute somehow. Jessica seemed unbothered by these changes, even appreciative that her mother was taking care of things around the house. But then Linda started making comments about our lifestyle. We ate too much takeout and needed more home-cooked meals. We watched too much television and should be reading more books. We stayed up too late on weekends and should maintain better sleep schedules. Our friends were too loud when they came over. Each criticism was delivered with a smile and framed as helpful advice from someone who cared about our well-being. "I'm just looking out for you both," she'd say. "You'll thank me later." The job search, meanwhile, seemed to be taking longer than expected. Linda always had explanations. The market was tough for people her age. Employers were discriminating. The positions available were beneath her experience level. She was being selective because she wanted to find the right fit. Month 2 became month 3, then month 4. Linda's 2 suitcases had somehow become an entire bedroom full of belongings. Her temporary stay was looking increasingly permanent, but every time I considered bringing it up with Jessica, Linda would have a promising interview or a potential lead that made it seem like a breakthrough is just around the corner. That's when the rules started. It began with a conversation about household expenses. Linda sat Jessica and I down one evening and explained that since she was contributing to the household by cooking and cleaning, we should establish some guidelines to make sure everything ran smoothly. "I think we should have a schedule for television time," she announced, pulling out a handwritten chart. "I prefer the evening news, and I find your programs quite loud and distracting." I stared at the schedule she'd created, which gave her control of our living room TV from 5 to 9 p.m. every weekday. "Linda," I said carefully, "this is our house. We don't really need a TV schedule." Her smile tightened slightly. "Thomas, I'm just trying to bring some organization to the household. We're all living together now, so we need to compromise." Jessica jumped in before I could respond. "Mom's right, honey. It's only fair that we all get to use the common areas." The breaking point came on a Saturday morning in month 6. I woke up early to make pancakes, something Jessica and I had done together every weekend for years. It was our tradition, our quiet time before the day got busy. I walked into the kitchen to find Linda already there, reorganizing our spice cabinet. "Good morning, Thomas," she said without looking up. "I'm implementing a new kitchen system. Everything needs to be in alphabetical order for efficiency." I looked at our spice cabinet, which she had completely emptied and was now refilling according to her organizational preferences. These were spices Jessica and I had collected over years of cooking together, arranged in a way that made sense to us. "Linda," I said, trying to keep my voice calm, "you don't need to reorganize our kitchen. We had a system that worked fine." She turned to face me with that patient expression she used whenever she thought I was being difficult. "Thomas, I do most of the cooking now, so it makes sense for the kitchen to be organized in a way that's efficient for me. You'll get used to it." That's when it hit me. She wasn't organizing our kitchen to be helpful. She was claiming territory, establishing ownership, making it clear that this was now her space, not ours. "Linda," I said, my voice firmer now, "this is my kitchen in my house. You don't get to reorganize it without asking me first." Her face changed completely. The helpful smile disappeared, replaced with cold indignation. "Excuse me? You heard me. This is my house. I didn't agree to let you move in so you could take over and start making rules for how Jessica and I live." Jessica appeared in the doorway, still in her pajamas, drawn by the sound of our raised voices. "What's going on?" Linda immediately switched to victim mode. "Thomas is being very rude to me, dear. I was just trying to help organize the kitchen, and he's treating me like I don't belong here." Jessica looked between us, and I could see her processing the situation. This was the moment I'd been dreading, the moment she'd have to choose between supporting her husband or protecting her mother. "Thomas," Jessica said carefully, "Mom's just trying to help. She does do most of the cooking now." My heart sank. After 6 months of watching her mother systematically take over our home, Jessica was still taking Linda's side. "Jessica," I said, "your mother has been living here for 6 months, making rules about our TV, our friends, our music, our food, our everything. This is our house, not hers." Linda crossed her arms. "I'm contributing to this household, Thomas. I cook, I clean, I organize. What do you do besides complain?" What did I do? I paid the mortgage. I paid the utilities. I paid for the groceries she was cooking. I paid for the cleaning supplies she was using. I paid for everything while she lived in my house for free and told me how to live in it. "I pay for everything," I said, my patience finally exhausted. "The house, the food, the electricity you use to watch your programs on my TV. Everything." "Thomas," she snapped, "you don't throw money in people's faces like that." But I was done pretending this arrangement was working.
Jessica, your mother moved in temporarily 6 months ago and has been taking over our house ever since. When does temporary end?" Linda's face flushed with anger. "I can't believe how ungrateful and selfish you're being, Thomas. Family is supposed to support each other. Family is supposed to be grateful when someone opens their home to them. Family doesn't move in and start making rules about how the homeowners should live." Jessica crossed our hands. "Both of you need to calm down. Thomas, I can't believe you're talking to my mother this way. She's been nothing but helpful." Helpful. 6 months of having my home turned into someone else's domain, and Jessica thought Linda was being helpful. That afternoon, after Linda had retreated to her room and Jessica had gone to run errands, I sat in my living room during the time slot I was supposedly allowed to use my own TV and made a decision. I called a lawyer. Not for divorce, not yet, but I needed to understand my legal options. Could I evict Linda? What were my rights as a homeowner? What would happen if Jessica and I separated? The lawyer was clear about my situation. Since Linda wasn't paying rent and had no lease agreement, she was legally considered a guest. I could ask her to leave with reasonable notice, and if she refused, I could pursue formal eviction proceedings. But, he warned me, if your wife opposes this, it could create serious marital problems. Have you considered counseling first? I had, but something told me Jessica wouldn't be receptive to the idea of telling her mother to leave regardless of what a counselor said. That evening, I decided to try one more direct conversation. After dinner, when we were all sitting in the living room during Linda's designated TV time, I addressed them both. "I think we need to discuss the living situation. Linda, it's been 6 months since you moved in temporarily. I think it's time we talk about next steps." Linda's expression immediately became defensive. "Are you kicking me out, Thomas? I'm asking about your timeline for finding your own place. This was supposed to be temporary." Jessica intervened before Linda could answer. "Thomas, Mom's family. We don't put timelines on helping family." "Jessica," I said, "your mother has turned our house into her house. We can't have friends over when we want. We can't watch TV when we want. We can't organize our own kitchen the way we want. This isn't helping family. This is being taken over by family." Linda crossed her arms. "I will not sit here and be insulted in this way. Jessica, I need to know where your loyalty lies. With your husband, who clearly doesn't want me here, or with your mother, who raised you and loves you unconditionally?" The ultimatum was out there. Jessica had to choose. She chose her mother. "Thomas," Jessica said, her voice cold, "I think you need to apologize to my mother and adjust your attitude about this living arrangement." That night, I slept in our guest room because Linda was crying loudly in the room next to our bedroom, and Jessica was comforting her. I lay there, listening to them talking about how unreasonable and selfish I was being, how family was supposed to stick together, how disappointed they both were in my behavior. The next morning, I made another call to my lawyer. "I want to explore separation," I told him. "If my wife won't support reasonable boundaries in our marriage, then maybe we don't have a marriage worth saving." The lawyer walked me through the process. Since the house was in both our names, it would have to be sold unless one of us bought out the other. Given that I could afford the mortgage payments alone and Jessica couldn't, I could potentially keep the house if she agreed to sell me her half. But there was another option, one that would solve multiple problems at once. He explained, "If you file for legal separation, you can request exclusive use of the marital home during the separation period. Your wife and her mother would have to find other accommodations." It was nuclear, but after 6 months of being treated like a guest in my own home, I was ready for nuclear. I filed the papers the next day. Jessica and Linda were served with legal documents while I was at work. When I came home that evening, they were both waiting for me in the living room with expressions of pure shock and fury. "How could you do this?" Jessica demanded, waving the papers at me. "You filed for separation without even talking to me?" "I tried talking to you. You chose your mother over your marriage. Now you get to live with that choice." Linda was crying again, but this time they were angry tears. "You're destroying this family, Thomas. You're breaking up a marriage because you can't share your house." "I'm not breaking up anything," I said. "I'm establishing boundaries that should have been in place 6 months ago. You have 30 days to find other living arrangements."
The next month was brutal. Jessica tried everything: tears, anger, bargaining, guilt trips. She promised Linda would be more respectful, that they'd both follow my rules, that things would be different. But I was done with promises and compromises. I'd spent 6 months watching my home and my marriage get taken over by someone who showed no gratitude and no respect. The time for negotiation had passed. Linda did find a job during those 30 days, ironically. Amazing how motivated someone can become when their free housing situation disappears. She found work as an administrative assistant and secured a small apartment across town. Jessica had a choice to make: reconcile with her husband or follow her mother. She chose to move in with Linda, at least temporarily, to help her through the transition. The separation became a divorce 6 months later. Jessica never came back. She couldn't forgive me for choosing selfishness over family, as she put it. I couldn't forgive her for allowing her mother to take over our home and then supporting her when I finally objected. The house sold, and we split the proceeds. Jessica used her half to help Linda put a down payment on a small condo. I bought a smaller place that was entirely mine. 2 years later, I ran into Jessica at a grocery store. She looked tired and stressed in a way I'd never seen when we were married. We made awkward small talk, and she mentioned that living with her mother had been more challenging than she had expected. Apparently, Linda had opinions about Jessica's job, her friends, her dating life, and every other aspect of her adult existence. "She means well," she said, but there was exhaustion in her voice. "She just wants what's best for me." I nodded politely, but inside I was thinking, now you know how I felt for 6 months. As we parted ways, Jessica said something that stuck with me. "Thomas, I know you think I chose her over you, but I was just trying to keep my family together." But that was the problem. Jessica never understood that marriage means creating a new family unit. When you get married, your spouse becomes your primary family, and everyone else, including parents, becomes extended family. Linda never respected that boundary, and Jessica never enforced it. They both expected me to accept being a secondary priority in my own home and marriage. Looking back, I don't regret my decision. Would it have been easier to just tolerate Linda's takeover indefinitely? Maybe. But I would have lost my self-respect and probably my sanity in the process. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for everyone involved is to establish clear boundaries, even when those boundaries result in uncomfortable consequences. Linda learned to support herself again. Jessica learned what it was really like to live under her mother's constant management, and I learned that sometimes saving yourself requires being willing to lose everything else. If you're in a situation where family members are taking over your home and your spouse is supporting them instead of you, don't wait 3 years like I did. Set boundaries early, enforce them consistently, and be prepared to make hard choices if those boundaries aren't respected. Because a house where you can't make the rules isn't your home, and a marriage where you're not the priority isn't worth saving. Thank you for watching.